So this is the second part of the Sri Isopanishad, and we're covering today mantras 4, 5, 6, and 7. And they're going to be 4 and 5 and 6 and 7. The subjects of those mantras are very much related, and so we're going to cover them in two pairs like that. We're going to cover 4 and 5 together and 6 and 7 together. That's how we're going to do it. And then, so we'll start with mantras 4 and 5, and the topic I'm saying is the Lord's inconceivable power. And when I was looking at the material this week, and trying to organize my thoughts about it, at the end of my thinking, I thought, well, generally we say that the Lord is all powerful, and therefore He can do anything, and that's a fair statement, and kind of sums everything up nicely. But after I kind of thought through the material, the thought came to my mind that the Lord is more all-powerful than I previously thought. Logically, of course, that's not possible. All-powerful means all-powerful. You can't become more all-powerful. But what I realized that there were certain preconceptions that I had in my mind that were limiting my ability to conceive the inconceivable. So His potencies are inconceivable, but they're here and demonstrated in the Shastra so that we can conceive of them to the best of our ability, and that they will help us to understand. So I found that I had some certain preconceptions, I think, that were limiting my ability to understand the full capacity of the Lord. And so I'm hoping that you'll have as much fun with this first section as I did this week. So let's look here at the verses first, because we're it's following up on what we learned in the first section. We already learned in the first session that the Lord is a different kind of guy. He's a completely different type of individual than anybody else. That much we already got. And now we're going to find out more details about that. And He's not a being like any other being. So here's mantra 4. We'll start with that. Aneja deka manaso javiyo naina deva apnuvan purnam varshat tadabato jnana teti tishtat tasminapo matarishva dadati. Although fixed in His abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach Him. Although in one place He controls those who supply the air and the rain, He surpasses all in excellence. And then text 5. Tadijati tannajati tadure tadvantike tad antarasya sarvasya tadu sarvasyasya payataha. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but He is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet He is outside of everything. So that also, I guess, from those two things we can understand the Lord is quite different from anyone else we've ever encountered or could even have conceived of. And so what I want to start with is I want to kind of review what we know about Him already and think about that a little bit. And then I think we'll be at a better space to understand these particular qualities mentioned in the verse. So we're first going to have just a little bit of a consideration of the Lord's inconceivable power and how it derives. This is the interesting thing. It derives from the notions that we already have heard about Him and that we're going to hear a little bit more in these verses, especially His situation as being the Param Satyam, the source of everything. If you understand Him as the source of everything, then many of the things that He does become a lot more, the powers that He has kind of follow from that. They make sense that He can do these things, or otherwise they just seem completely ununderstandable. It follows from his situation as this unique entity who's the source of everything. So here in this I would say in mantra 1 we learned that everything is owned and controlled by the Lord. We call that the Ishavasham principle. But we learned that He has an ownership and control is very unique. It's different than we usually think of. And all of us may own things and be able to manipulate them, have them under our control. But His type of control is different than that. Even we have the the devatas who control some of the, like I said, the rain and the air and various other things, they're simply manipulating things that exist outside of them. They're separate things. They manipulate them. They control them that way. That's what we think of. That's how we think of control generally. There's something out there outside of me, and I somehow am able to operate it and control it. Machinery, different devices. But the Lord is different in this type. He has a unique type of ownership and control. And we found that particularly when we looked at different versions of mantra number 1. We noticed that in the Srimad Bhagavatam there were almost identical a verse almost identical to mantra 1. And Prabhupada even translated it the same way. There were just a couple words that were different, and they were synonyms to what's there in the Isopanishad. But Prabhupada, he translated those things slightly differently. So we saw some of the potential that's in those verses. And so that avasyam, in the Isopanishad, he said owned by the Lord. Owned, and then he says controlled by the Lord. But in the Srimad Bhagavatam 8:110, where it's quoted there's that verse 8:110, and then that same verse is quoted in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So there's actually three available translations of this avasyam in the same context that we saw last time. So owned, he says in the text of the Isopanishad, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says everything is an expansion of the Lord's energies. And then in the Bhagavatam verse itself, he says the Lord is everywhere as the super soul. So there's three senses to that verse, and the two other senses, that he's an expansion of it, and everything is an expansion of his energies, and everywhere is expanded by the super soul, help you to see the unique way that he owns it. So everything that exists, he's also is coming from his own self. It's not something that's external. It's not him and the other things. It's he's manifesting these things, and he's present, throughout the creation. So he's there. So those things are different from our type of control and ownership that we're used to, and they're going to be relevant to our consideration of his power. Mm-hmm. And then here from the mantra 5 purport, Prabhupada he restates this. He says, the fact is that there is nothing but God within and without. Everything is a manifestation of his different energies, like the heat and light emanating from a fire, and in this way there is a oneness among his diverse energies. That's from the purport of mantra 5. Mm-hmm. So he's emanating, and in some way they are still connected with him. We create something, we build something. First, even we used to have to start with materials that are outside of us, that we didn't create, and they remain outside of us. When Krishna emanates, these things, there remains a certain level of integration, and we're gonna look at that, what sort of integration is still there. And in these two particular features, two more unique features, and this comes from, it makes sense from the fact that he's there as a super soul. But it's stated directly in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the very first verse. It says that he is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations. So think about it. The way we can determine where our bodies end and where the outside world begins is where we are able to be conscious and where we are able to have control. You can touch this table, I can't feel it. You touch me, I feel it. I can move my hand, but I can't move my table unless I use my hand to move it. I have an influence over a certain area, and I have sensation over a certain area. And that's where my self ends and the outside world begins. Now Krishna, he has consciousness over the whole manifestation and control over it. So the rest of existence is like his extended body. Just as easily as I can move my finger, or I can move my toe, which is further away, he can move something close by, something far away, because it's all in some ways remains integrated with him. The other thing is, this is really important here. Prabhupada mentions this in the Mantra 5 purport. He says, he can convert his different potencies according to his own will. And he says, we will understand that even if the Lord appears before us in the form of material energy, he's talking about specifically about the deity here. It is quite possible for him to convert this energy into spiritual energy. Since the source of the energies is one and the same, the energies can be utilized according to the will of their source. So he says that not only does he have sensation, is there conscious a sensation of everything and control, but they're malleable. He can change them as he wishes. That piece of stone or wood or metal that's the deity can now become spirit instead of matter. And he can do that with all of his energies. He can change their constitution and the way they're manifested. We make something, and it takes us work to adjust it. If we don't like the way we've decorated our house, we can change it, but boy, it takes separate effort. He can just change it into something else. He can convert his energies. And we'll look a little bit more at that. But that's very important for, I think, understanding the nature of his power. In the invocation, we learn that even though he has all of these manifestations, and even though they still remain integrated to him in some way, that he is not reduced even in the slightest way. He remains purnam, complete, even though he does this. And we have a little slide. The next slide says it's more like this, where the sun is shining. Then in the second picture here, we have a drop of ink dropping into a beaker full of water, and slowly it dissolves. The drop then is gone. It's spread all over the place. The original drop is gone. The sunshine, of course, I mean, if we're going to be picky and deal with modern astrophysics, we know that the sun is shining but slowly consuming its fusionable material. Its potential energy is being reduced, even though it doesn't appear to be changed. With Krishna, there's no loss even of potential energy. That's what so the sun is kind of not a perfect analogy, but it's one that when we observe it, we don't see the sun weakening. It takes a long, long time for that to happen. So all of his energies radiate out, but he still has the capacity to make more and more and more. No problem. So again, that's unique. And now this next slide is we're all familiar with if we've seen the Srimad Bhagavatam, especially now it's usually on the first canto. This is a little older version. I had to find something that was big enough to show up on the PowerPoint, and it shows a map of all of existence, at least kind of a representation of that, of all of existence. And we see in the middle of the book there, we in the lotus flower, we have Goloka Vrindavan, Krishna's abode. And surrounding him are all the different Vaikuntha planets, all the different spiritual planets. And you can see the glowing Brahman effulgence everywhere. And then below him, you see this little divided off section where the material universes are. And you see Karanadakshaya Vishnu there. And smaller, you see all the different other universes, but then just for our perception, they have one big one that they have a cross-section of, so we can see this is a universe. All these little dots are universes, and we have Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Lord Brahma. And this is the yogis who can travel, and they see something like this. Okay? But I was thinking, and so when we look at it, this is what all of reality looks like. And I was thinking about a couple things though that have always fascinating me from the scriptures. A couple of stories that always were kind of puzzling to me, and intriguing to me, and interesting to me for those reasons. And I want to bring those up because I think they're going to help lead to this kind of deeper understanding that I hope we're going to achieve here. And there's the one story. This appears in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I'm not sure where it comes from. Some other source too. It's quoted in there, where we have Krishna is sitting in Dwarka, and you see all these fellows with the multiple heads. These are different Lord Brahmas, And there was a story at one point where it says Lord Brahma went to Dwarka to see Krishna when he was present. And he came to the door of the palace, and the doorman, was there. And Lord Brahma says, please announce that Lord Brahma is here and would like to have an audience with the Lord. And the doorman went in, came back, and he says, the Lord wants to know which Brahma you are. And so he says, oh, I'm the son of the father of the Chatushna, the Kumaras, and I'm the four-headed Brahma. And comes in. He says, okay, come in. He comes in, and Lord Krishna says, oh, you have some business? What do you want to do? What do you want from me? He says, well, I'll tell you about that later, because I'm confused. Mm-hmm. There's only one Brahma in every universe. So why did you ask which Brahma I am? And it says the Lord meditated for a moment, and the next thing that this Brahma saw were all of these other Brahmas coming into the room, bowing down to Krishna, and it says they could hear their helmets colliding together. So from that person's perspective, they were all in one space, quite clearly. None of the other Brahmas could see any of the other ones, only ours could see that all were present. And it says from their point of view, they were in their own universes, in the Dwarka that's in their own universe. And they had come to see Krishna, and they were dealing with him on an individual basis. But from Krishna's point of view, and then from our Brahma's point of view, they were all in one space. So if you were in some far universe going to the Dwarka, because Dwarka and Vrindavan, they're there in every universe. So they thought, oh, the Lord has come and called me to see them. And they all were thinking that. And so from our point of view, they're all over the place with that big map. And there they are in the exact same space, so that even their helmets are clicking together. So I've always been fascinated by that. And then there's this other story about Markandeya Rishi. And he specifically asked the Lord, he satisfies the Lord, I think it's Narayana Rishi actually, that he wants to understand his Maya, his power of illusion. Please show that to me. And so it says that the Lord kind of smiled at that. This is going to be fun. And then this amazing thing happens. Markandeya Rishi is staying in his ashram, doing his regular devotional activities, and all of a sudden, things start to happen. It's the end of the universe. The devastation starts to take place. And the rising waters of devastation come and engulf his ashram. He sees all the people on the earth are being wiped out. Eventually, it inundates everything. He finds himself floating alone on the ocean of devastation. Says he's feeling this tremendous hunger, tremendous thirst. The Tamingala fish and the makaras that swim in these gigantic beings that swim in this ocean of devastation are bothering him, threatening to swallow him and kill him. And he's in that situation for, it says, millions of years. That's his experience. Millions of years. And then suddenly he comes upon this little island where he sees what he's seeing right here. This little baby Krishna sitting on a peepal leaf. And Lord Krishna is sucking his toe. And when he sees him, all of his misery goes away, and he starts running towards him, swimming towards him or whatever, somehow approaching him. And the little baby sucks him into his mouth, swallows him. And when he gets swallowed, he sees the universal form. He sees all the ingredients of creation, like this whole gigantic, huge display of all the different parts of the universe. Then the little baby spits him out and disappears. And as he disappears, Markandeya Rishi is back in his ashram just like he started. Now, in trying to understand what was happening there, previously I thought, well, maybe it might be some kind of a dream. Sometime he goes off into trance, but it doesn't say he goes to sleep. It doesn't say he goes into a trance. Or maybe he's, miraculously transported to a place where the devastation is, but it doesn't say that either. And either of those things, either of those explanations, don't really help you in understanding the Lord's Maya. Right? We can understand going into some kind of trance and having a dream or a vision. We can even understand how Krishna could mystically transport someone from one place to another. That's just, he can do that sort of thing. That doesn't explain to us how his Maya works. And so I don't think either one of those explanations, that he just kind of, was rendered unconscious and had a vision, or that he was transferred someplace else, is the actual case. We'll talk about that later, and we'll talk about how I think this other thing can be quite possible with Brahma. That makes more sense when we understand the more complete notion of God's complete all powerfulness. Okay, so let's go back to that map of what lives, or what exists here on the Bhagavatam. And when we look at that, we make a couple of presumptions. Okay, let's look out. We have them recorded here in the next slide. So because we live our lives within space and time, we're contained within these things, right? And we're subject to the laws of nature. We're used to this kind of thing. Existence happens within space. It happens within time. It happens within certain, Bible calls them conditions. That's what conditioned life means. We're subject to conditions. And it's therefore difficult for us to think about existence or existing being in any other way. And I think that gives us certain preconceptions. So when I look at the map, it looks like Krishna is also existing within space, right? He's in a certain point in that whole map. He's here. There's everything all around, and so it seems like he's existing within space. And we know that, of course, Krishna can do crazy things with time. In different regions of the universe, time moves slower or more quickly. But still, things are happening there. So you still could think that there's some kind of universal time. Things, because things happen there. He has a daily routine. Krishna has kind of a daily routine. Ashtakaliya Lila. He does different things, but it's certain basic things he does every day. So you could think there's kind of time there. And of course we know that he's powerful, and so any law of nature that exists can't really prevent him from doing something. He can contravent any laws of nature. It still seems that things are kind of happening in an orderly way. So we kind of project our experience on that. And and I don't think this is altogether appropriate, especially when we think of Krishna as the Param Satyam. So next slide, we say, remember that everything that exists, including space and time or any kind of natural laws, is Krishna, or his energy, which he controls, manipulates, right, and is conscious of. And so it falls under his cognition, his control, and manipulation. He's not existing within space. Space is part of his expansion, if it's there. And he can do what he wants to do with it. So what I would compare this to, as a rough comparison, would be like this. This is the kind of power he has. Virtual reality. Okay? And next we have a little thing that says, if you control the code, you control the world. So think about how a virtual reality works. Okay? Everything within a virtual reality is soft. If whatever qualities are there, whether it's spatial relationships, textures, touches, hardness, softness, time, that's under your ability to control if you're the person creating the virtual reality. Everything is, it's soft. If this wall is hard, I can make it soft. In the Matrix movie, the one guy, it seemed as though the Matrix responded to what your ideas were. And so if you thought things were hard, they were hard. The one guy, people would shoot bullets at him, and he could stop the bullets. Because it was, there's an interface direct interface between the computer world and the mind. And so if he thought it would stop, he could make it stop. He could fly. He could do things you wouldn't expect to be able to do. It was just a matter of, it said, free your mind. You had to free your mind from your preconceptions, and the virtual reality would respond to that, and he could do it. All kind of crazy things are possible. Okay, if you control the code, you can control the world. Okay, so think about it. What you could do if you were controlling a virtual reality, you could make it that somebody goes inside a little house, even a closet. They enter the closet. It's inside the house, and they could have access to a city in a distant place. You walk through, because now you can't fit a city in a house. If you have actual absolute space, right? You can't do that. But in a virtual reality, you can do whatever you want. You can walk through a little closet, and now you're in Paris. And you can come back out into the closet if you want. What's the problem? There's no space there that you have to put things into. It's all part of it's all soft. It's all part that can be controlled. You could have people in different regions of the virtual reality enter into different doorways and end up in the same spot, like Lord Brahma was doing. There they are. There you go from here, you go from here, and you end up in the same room. You can do that because you're in control of everything. Right? So someone could be near the ocean and suddenly be swept away by a tsunami. Just as they are pulled under the waves, they could find themselves where they were before the tsunami hit and have everything be just as it was before it appeared. Same thing as Markandeya Rishi. Suddenly, you're in some spot, the whole world changes, you have some kind of crazy experience, and you come right back to that. A person who's programming virtual reality can make that happen. It's not difficult. And to me, that something like that. And so Krishna. So I'm not suggesting that the world is a virtual reality, but I'm comparing the total type of control that Krishna has as being the source of everything, absolutely everything. He's not also the space that he appears to be within. That's under his control. The time that he seems to be within, the laws of nature, those are all under his control. For him, they're just as soft and manipulable as if he were a computer programmer making a virtual reality. So therefore, there's no external things he has to deal with. Space, time, all these things don't have any real meaning for him. It can happen any way he likes. So Markandeya Rishi, he doesn't have to go somewhere. He doesn't have to have a hallucination. Just that he has that actual experience. And notice that it's not that he was only experiencing Maya at that time. Right? It says the material world, Prabhupada says in the Mantra 4 Purport, the material world is the creation of the Lord's external potency, and the spiritual sky where the kingdom of God is situated is the manifestation of its internal potency. Now, the external potency and internal potency also have referred to in different ways. Right? As parts of the Lord's marginal potency, we experience either a reality produced by the Lord's Mahamaya, that's his external potency, or one produced by the Lord's Yogamaya, internal potency. That's all we have. We have these different Mayas. So when Markandeya Rishi was sitting in his ashram, he was under a type of Maya. When he's experiencing his cosmic experience, he's under the control of Maya. When he goes back, he's still under the control of Maya. So the Maya creates the whole experience. The time relationships, the spatial relationships, all the content of it. And it's just as soft as a virtual reality. He can do anything he wants. And that derives from the fact that he is everything and is in control of everything. So he does. So we tend to think of these, like if he goes from one place to another, of course we think we can go as fast as he wants. That's no problem. But we think, wow, he really moves fast. He doesn't have to. He can be any place he wants, just by the virtue that space doesn't have any meaning for him. I heard the Sataputta Prabhu one time. He was giving a little bit different situation, but he was explaining how Krishna could be every place at once, and he was using the notion of higher dimensional space. And so Krishna, of course, could manifest it that way. He was saying, like, if you have a piece of paper with two dots, one on towards each end. If you're in that plane of the paper, you have to travel from one side of the paper to the other to reach one to the other. But if the paper is curved up and the two dots are overlapping, You're basically in the same, and you can get out of that two-dimensional plane. You're right there already. But he was saying, it's like that you could have this, manifold, higher dimensional space where Krishna is, he's right there for everything. And so certainly if he wants to, he can make it that way. But also from my understanding, that also assumes something of a absolute space. He could do it that way if he wants, but he also wouldn't even have to, because he can make space be whatever he wants. There's no notion of distance in a reality like that. He can just be any place he wants, every place he wants. So that's why I thought, when I thought about this, that's why I thought, wow, God's more all-powerful than I previously thought. Even though that's not possible.
Is it similar to the description in Vrindavan of how he goes from Vrindavan to Nandagram very quickly, or how the lotus petal of Vrindavan opens?
Well, I thought about that too, because which was it Sanatana Goswami who was doing the parikrama every day?
Yes.
And he was getting too old, and he couldn't he couldn't cover the whole distance, and so mystically he was doing everything, but the distance was shortened. And so sometimes it's described that the petals of Vrindavan open and close like a lotus flower. So I think, the spatial relationships can just be changed. Also, when you look at it, there's other crazy things. Well, we're going to talk some about those later. But there's when Narada Muni goes to Dwarka,
he sees Krishna,
but he not only sees Krishna in all the different palaces. They say, okay, that's expansion, but they're at different times of the day. He goes from oneness in the morning, he walks for a couple minutes, and it's afternoon. So in that tiny little space, there's all different times going on. Also, Vrindavan itself, count the number of cows that Krishna has. Try to put them into that, that region of Vrindavan. You can't. So when you enter in Vrindavan, you have a larger space within a smaller space. The gopis and Krishna dance and the Rasa Lila for the night of Brahma. But that was only 5,000 years ago, and it's gone. So it's a larger time within a smaller time. Now, in a virtual reality type of environment where you have full control, that's very easy to do. You just do it. You have full freedom to do that. Now, that's not to mean that Krishna couldn't put a smaller space in a bigger space if he wanted to. But that just, it makes total sense that can happen.
Yeah, I was hearing one of the lectures from Swami Maharaj, where he said that the abodes and everything, especially he was talking about this point that the abode of Vrindavan, it contracts itself and then expands itself as Krishna wants to enjoy the pastimes based on his desire.
Yeah. And so we can understand how that's very easily done if you have control also of space and time. You can manifest that. You see?
Your mic picks up the questions, or do you want?
It does pretty well, actually. Yeah, you can hear them.
It also brings me to that reflection of how it's, and obviously this will happen if one becomes a pure devotee of Krishna or a mature and advanced devotee of Krishna. But I would describe that the ocean of the material world reduces to the size of water in the footprint of a car. That same idea of this insurmountable body of water, then you can actually just step over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So it makes sense in that way. So now I'm hoping that having discussed things in this way, we can take a look at the details of the descriptions in 4 and 5, mantra 4 and 5. Ms. Guru.
Question regarding a couple of slides back, that Krishna is directly or indirectly conscious of everything. How is it indirectly?
There's a couple different ways it can be. Of course, direct means just we can understand what that means. He's Krishna and he can be conscious of anything. He also has the super soul expansions. That way, it's a little indirect. Because directly means he's there, sitting with his flute in Goloka Vrindavan, and he can just know it. He doesn't need to know it through his super soul expansions. But he also can know it through the super soul expansions. And then sometimes he gets news from others. that the Lord Brahma comes to the ocean of milk, and says, "Hey, there's the problems going on." So sometimes also he hears reports. But I would say, but directly meaning, I would say directly is him, and indirectly through his expansions or through other
So
ways.
does that mean that I was thinking about like we think of one thing and we can't think of another at the same time, simultaneously?
Yeah, Krishna
That limitation on
he doesn't
him?
have that problem. He doesn't have that problem. Yeah, he can be conscious of everything. That uh, you can't overwhelm him with too many multitasks. We have a certain limit to our multitasking capability, and usually I think also it's when we do it, isn't it more like we're still doing things at once. We don't really have the multi-thread processors in our brain so much. That's why you can't act like it. But he can be like the supercomputer, do so many things at once, and doesn't affect anything. Yeah, I don't think there's any limitation on his cognition like that. But of course, we do know also that we said how his manifestations are also complete. That for the most part, he just lets them run. He has his demigods and other people, other energies that take care of things. It's fairly automated in many ways. But when he wants to do something different, he can do something different. So in many ways, his energies also just take care of a lot of the work. They supervise things and do what he wants. And sometimes he gives a little instruction: do this way, do that way. But he's not directly processing everything. A lot of times he gives autonomy to some of his. We'll talk about that later on. How he gives autonomy to some of his creations.
So at times that the scriptures mention that like Lord Vishnu is reminded by Lakshmi.
Exactly.
What's going on over there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that means he's focusing on one thing only, and
That's for his Leela. We can talk about that maybe some of that a little bit later. But yeah, he becomes simultaneously omniscient and focused on one thing. He's able to do. That's how it's put. How it's put. But we'll talk about that. We'll get to the point where we'll talk about his Leela. Right now, let's build up to we're going to build the foundation of understanding that, and so we won't get into that too much right now. Okay, so now let's look at it, at the things that are there. He said he's that one the thing that says in mantra 4 is he's being compared also to the devas, because we already know from what we've heard so far that he's quite different from any other kind of being. But still, when people think of a controller, they remind there's so many other devas who also are worshipped, and so the mantra is taking some care to distinguish him from them. So it says there are powerful devas who control many aspects of the material world and are worshipped by many, and they do not compare at all to the Lord. This is understood from mantra 4. This is although the Lord has been clearly shown to be without compare, mantra 4 makes certain that there is no confusion on this point. It says, number 1, they have no ability to reach his abode. He's far above them. They have no way to contact him. But they are under his control, even from an apparent distance. But here also, it could profit in the smooth translation. It says that they are under his control. He controls those who Dadati supply the air and the rain. But the word in his word for word translation of tasmin is in him. Is in him. So again, it refers to the fact that everything is part of his energies. So these devatas are part of his energy. So this confirms what we know already. Everything is the Lord's energy and is therefore owned and controlled by him. So they can't approach him. They're controlled by him. Actually, they're his energy. That's made clear by this verse. Just so it's hard to get rid of preconceived notions. And so people say, well, we worship Krishna, we worship these other devas. How is there a difference? So it just doubles down on that. Because people sometimes have a hard time. We have a hard time to open our minds. So that's done in mantra 4. And then it says, while remaining stationary, he can travel faster than the mind and catch anyone, however fast they may be moving. Okay. Now again, we can understand that. Okay, and as I'm saying, there's various ways he can do something like that. First of all, he's everywhere as the super soul. So wherever you're moving, he's right there. He could just pop up, no problem. And plus, while he's staying in Goloka, no problem. Also, if he wants to move through space, he doesn't have to, but if he wants to, there's nothing that limits his speed. So he can, where everybody else has a certain limit. So if he wants to do that, just fly it through space and time with unparalleled speed, no problem. What's to stop him from doing that? Right? Space has no meaning for him, so he can appear instantaneously anyway, personally, and he can be any number of places at once, either through multiple forms, or a single form can appear in a number of places. We saw that happening with Krishna and Dwarka. So there's all kind of ways he can handle that situation, moving faster than the mind and catching anybody. Even if they're not running, even if they've got starships, whatever they've got, whatever devices they have, he can take care of that easily enough. We can see it's pretty easy for him. All these amazing talents he has, if we understand something about his all powerfulness. Then it says he walks and he does not walk. Okay. Now you take a look at it. He's famous actually. When he's in Vrindavan as a cowherd boy, he walks barefoot, and he has all these beautiful markings on his feet, and he leaves his footprints all over Vrindavan. Reminds all of the residents of Vrindavan of his existence there. They're always they try to not disturb those footprints because it allows them to keep remembering him. So he walks barefoot and leaves his footprints in the dusty soil. Therefore, if he wants to walk through space, he can walk, he can dance, he can run. He's the Ranchor also, right? He runs away from Jarasandha, jumps off the mountain, and they run away. He can dance. He's the Nataraj. But he's not dependent upon that for locomotion. Right? If we're driving down the road and our car breaks down, okay, we can walk too, but that's a real inconvenience. Right? We walk and we walk. But Krishna walks if he wants to, and if he wants to move in some other way, he moves in any other way. He's not dependent upon walking for locomotion. So remember we had that discussion about what it means to be unlimited. Right? And so if he can't walk, that's a limitation. But if he has to walk, that's a big limitation too. So in this case, he can move in so many other ways, but if he wants to walk in and out of herding the cows at the meandering pace with his friends, he can do it. He can create that reality for himself. No problem. So he can walk. We can't say he can't, but his walking is not like our walking. He has a choice. Make sense? The Lord is both near and far. Let me see. It says, the abode of the Lord is beyond the material sky. This is from the Mantra 5 purport. The abode of the Lord is beyond the material sky, and we have no means to measure even the material sky, this material sky. If the material sky extends so far, then what to speak of the spiritual sky, which is altogether beyond it? That the spiritual sky is situated far, far away from the material universe is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 15:6. But despite the Lord's being so far away, he can at once, within less than a second, descend before us with a speed swifter than that of the mind or wind. So that's Prabhupada's commentary from Mantra 5. And then we have, and we already discussed how it's easy for him just to appear someplace. Then the last one is that he is both inside and outside. And Prabhupada in the purport gives one way that happens. I'm taking. There's different contexts. This is within the context of a single universe. Prabhupada says he is outside in his Virat form, or the universal form, and he is within everything as the Antaryami, or the super soul. So this is from the perspective of a single universe. that he's within everything, even within, it says, the atoms as the super soul, and then there's the whole universal form, the cosmic manifestation, which makes up everything, the whole totality of things. He says, therefore, he's outside of things. He's not one of the things. He's the whole thing. If you take the context of all material universes, we saw that the map there where there's Karnadakshaya Vishnu and all the universes there. He's inside again as the super soul, and outside is Mahavishnu. All right? He's outside all the universes. Now there's another one that we can take in the context of. Oh, I can think of another one too. That we know that what Prabhupada says that when you become a devotee of Krishna, the Paramatma is replaced by Krishna. Krishna appears in the heart directly, not just the Paramatma. And he says it's like a spiritual television. All the pastimes are flowing in there. It's called Svarasaki. So really the spiritual world is right there. So if we travel externally through a Vimana or through yogic powers, you have to go a long ways to reach Goloka. But that same Goloka is right there in the heart, near and far, inside and outside. But also, if you take all of reality, he says he appears to be a part of reality in his personal form. We saw that map. There he is sitting in the middle of the whole map of everything. But in fact, all reality has come with him. So he's not like anything else that's within reality. He can make the whole reality different. Like if you had the person who makes the virtual reality be in the virtual reality, he's creating the virtual reality. Well, he's interacting with the entities in the virtual reality, so he's in it. But he's not really in it. It's only by choice. He's also creating everything. So he's not in it in the same sense that other entities are. He's in and without.
No question. So on the last slide, you discussed about the spiritual sky and material sky.
Mm.
And I'm just trying to understand the spiritual sky. Like Goloka is the one like we consider that say spiritual.
That's one of the spiritual planets in the spiritual sky.
So what is the difference between the spiritual planet and the sky? I mean, it is a part of.
No, the planets are within that spiritual space. The whole spiritual. It's like we have space in which all the material universes exist, and within each universe, the material planets are existing in a certain space. So there's a spiritual space where all the spiritual planets are existing. That's the spiritual sky.
Okay. And like last class we were discussing about those 24 different material, below the planet.
Yeah, that's within the material universe.
They are in
and
the
every material universe has that sort of thing.
Okay. So spiritual sky, you consider like ourselves also. You are saying the example that as the Lord is inside us.
Well,
we consider
it's possible to access the spiritual world
I see.
because he appears there. So again, because he can do anything with space, we may have to travel externally for a long ways to reach it. If you see that map, it's a long distance, but he can be present near in the heart.
So like,
and so the super advanced devotees, they can experience the spiritual world even while they're here. They enter that different, they'll kind of enter a different dimension, more or less, as we would say.
So can we consider like Vrindavan or Dwarika as a spiritual place on the earth, or like?
Yes, it's an interface. I mean, it's a place where the spiritual and material overlap. And so again, just like those Dwarakas, they're all in one place. The spiritual world manifests in that spot. Okay. When you enter in there, there's a place where you can. Now, if you're not very devotional, you won't see anything. But otherwise, there's in the Brihat Bhagavatamritam says this one devotee says Gopakumara, he goes from one to the other, and he says I can't see any difference between the two. Okay? So again, it's a non-spatiality thing. It's present right there. There's a way to access the spiritual dimension right there. Okay?
Eventually, did Gopakumar see it when he made progress?
No, that was after he went back to Krishna. He says, sometimes I come down here, and sometimes I'm up in Goloka, and I don't see any difference between the two.
Oh, between
So
her.
Between yeah, between those two. Yeah, not between the outside world and Vrindavan, but between that. Okay? So I think if we understand something about the natural powers that will come to the Lord, just understanding his nature, then all these kind of wild and contradictory things that's being said about him are quite easy to understand, how he can be all these things. And it kind of, so that his situation being all powerful kind of doesn't derive from that, but it makes sense. All these things make perfect sense knowing his position. So now we can come up to the next section, mantras 6 and 7. I'll check what our time is here. And these what I'm calling realizing the Lord's presence. Prabhupada mentions this in one of the purports. It's seeing, also we can say it's seeing the universe as it's done through the eyes of great devotees or through the scriptures. That we don't see things quite as they are with our current level of experience and understanding. And so we're going to talk about that here in mantras 6 and 7. And so we'll look at them both together. And there's mantra 6 is here. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanu pashyati sarva bhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijagupsate. He who sees systematically, this is the key word here is anupashyati. And Prabhupada gives 3 different kind of translations to that. One who sees systematically everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, and who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. And that's very closely related to the next verse, mantra 7. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atma vaibhut ajanataha tatrako mohakashoka ekatvam anupashyataha is anupashyata, which Prabhupada says, one who sees through authority or one who sees constantly like that. One who always sees all living entities as spiritual sparks. In quality, one with the Lord, becomes a true knower of things. What then can be illusion or anxiety for him? Okay? So there's a certain way of seeing when we understand things properly. That it says it removes all hatred, removes all lamentation and illusion. That's what he says. That's what they say. And they correspond to, and the focus here is on these bhutanis, the living beings. And we're focusing on the living beings here. We see them in a certain way. We won't hate anyone. So this is perfect. And this is I took this one. Sometimes Prabhupada kind of foreshadows future verses, and this is back from mantra 4. But he says perfect knowledge means knowing the Lord in all his features, knowing his potencies, and knowing how these potencies work by his will. So that's kind of fitting for this point here, because that's what we're trying to do here. And then in these 2 verses, we're focusing our attention on the bhutani, the living entities. Okay? And what they're saying is that if we can see things properly, that in every body there is the soul and the super soul. We got our 2 little famous illustrations here from the BBT illustrations. We see all the different creatures. They have a little spiritual spark inside, and in all the living creatures, there's the super soul residing within. So the Lord is there, and these spiritual particles are there. And it says that one who understands the presence of the super soul in all beings gives up hatred. And because there's a certain sobriety that comes when we feel the presence of the Lord, and if we understand, there's actually a couple of things. We'll go a little bit more deeper into that. There's also the soul is related to that. But when you feel that the Lord is present there, then you kind of give a certain respect. You don't see that, because what we see when we have hatred or attachment or things, is we tend to see those entities as being independent, disconnected from the Lord, and we feel ourselves at that point disconnected. And so they either are doing something positive for us or maybe something negative. That's why we hate them, And we think, but if we understand that the presence of God is there, then we also can understand that somehow these entities are existing by His will. And it's a little bit harder for us then to come up with desire or hate. It may still not be pleasant for us. This person may not be pleasant. This entity might be pleasant, but we understand somehow this is the will of the Lord, and our reaction then becomes different.
It's such a powerful statement, because there's so much hatred in the world. I mean, and it amazes me how people can so hate other people, like with deep rage and deep hatred, and for what? Because they're just a different religion or a different color of skin or whatever, or maybe they hurt them. But it's such a powerful statement to break that, to give people permission to not hate. Some people feel they have to hate in order to show how great they are, or how loyal they are, or how
Loyal many times,
nationalistic they are, or what a good person they are.
Yeah.
And it just shifts it up to the next level.
And usually when that happens also, we even know that there's without even a notion to God or the soul, there's a tendency for people to dehumanize
Yes.
the others. Like if you see posters from the world wars and things, how you try to dehumanize the enemy. You see little posters of the Germans in America, or this kind of stuff. And they find different ways to dehumanize the other people that you're trying to kill. And so even if there's not a notion of God being present or an eternal soul being present, even people realize that they're humans, and if they can take that consciousness away, it makes it easier to hate them and to do so. So imagine how the reverse is true when there's notion that God's present there. We're gonna kind of cycle back on this a little bit towards the end, because there's even another dimension to that. Both because the super soul is not only existing in others, but it's existing in us, and also there's the individuals are there along with the super soul, and that makes a difference too. We're going to cycle back on this, but this is what's mentioned in that verse. It's good enough to start. That is, if we have that vision, then we won't have hatred. And then the souls are very special. So because everything is a creation of the Lord's energy. So also the souls are the Lord's marginal potency, Prabhupada says. But they have some very they have an interesting characteristic, which is mentioned in the verses ekatvam, a oneness, which is expressed. There's a couple of different ways it's expressed here. And Prabhupada gives us, especially in his commentary. First, he says one in quality, and he gives the comparison. So we're of the same kind of substance as the Lord, and he gives these two examples here in the next slide, like sparks from a fire, or like a drop of the ocean. That the Lord is like the fire or like the ocean, unlimited, and we're a little tiny portion of a similar substance. And he says we have similar qualities, even. So our personal qualities, the personal qualities of the soul, are reflections of the Lord's personal qualities. He mentions about he just kind of mentions it really briefly. He talks about the souls having 80% of the known qualities of the Lord. Well, there's we'll see in the Nectar of Devotion, I think we'll get that far, where it mentions that there's, of course it says there's unlimited qualities of the Lord, but there's 64 that are super prominent, just for our consideration. And 80% of those, it says that we have in a smaller quantity. So we have even some similar personalities. That's what it says. Little small ones.
Oh, I have a question.
Mm.
So you said like super soul is also like every living entity they have the soul and the super soul.
Yeah.
And then Mataji made the statement about this, the strong statement about the hatred.
Yeah.
So if the people like the super soul is also there along with the soul,
Mm-hmm.
and some souls like they are acting against the God will or something, hating other people,
Mm.
following some different path.
Mm-hmm.
How this super soul will feel inside because they are also sitting inside. It will be like, right? It will be like too much, uh, yeah, for Lord Himself, right?
Well, we're going to cover some of that also, for the relationship between the soul and the super soul.
Mm-hmm.
Because you also you brought about something that's interesting, okay? Because we already heard how the Lord is in total control of His energies, right? And we already heard in the previous verse that human life is a life of responsibility. We have a choice. We can follow the directions of the Lord, even when He's there watching right over us in the heart, or we don't do it. Now that seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Why doesn't He just make us do it? Right? He can. No problem. Why doesn't He? Why does He have creatures who have that freedom of choice? That was because, and we're gonna get to this later on, but this is because of relationship. The Lord is absolute. Everything is related to Him, but He's not related to anything else. So He's, relative means he's not. He's self-sufficient. He's self-sustaining. He's self-existent. But then He wants to have relationships. He has decided. And remember, He can make any reality He wants as quickly as He wants. Now, if we think about being able to do that, we think, oh man, I'll just do everything. I'll be every place, do everything, do all kind of wonderful stuff. We think that would be so much fun. We think our unhappiness comes from the fact that we have so many limitations.
Mm-hmm.
If I had more of that, if I could do more of this, if I could, spread out into more places, if I had more resources, all these things would be great. Now God has a chance to explore that to the fullest possible extent. And His decision? That's not that much fun. He's come to the notion that having love, He's one in one sense. There's one without the second. He wants there to be two. When there's two, there can be love. And if you have love, you have to have a certain amount of freedom. So He has creations that have a certain amount of freedom. They can say that they want to interact with the Lord, or they want to do their own thing. That's for the power of relationship, the power of love. That's why He does that. And so anyway, we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, but that'll be something that'll happen more in future Bhakti Shastri classes. But yeah, we also have a little freedom. That's another unique thing about the soul. Okay, so of the similar nature, like a spark in the fire or the drop in the ocean. And then he says, there's another sense to ekatvam, that the soul should be one in interest with the Lord and His other devotees. So he says, sometimes he talks about a functional family. He uses the notion of family. Sometimes we have some dysfunctional ones, so it might not always fly, but he says functional family where everybody's working together for a kind of common goal. We have, even any other kind of thing. Sometimes we have a group of people who we're very like-minded, have certain goals, and we feel a connection that way. There's a oneness amongst us. We feel one. And so it says that we, if we make the right choice, will want to cooperate with the Lord. We'll want to please Him. We will want to do what He wants. We'll be one in interest with Him, and the other persons who are devoted to Him. We'll feel a oneness that way. That's the other sense of ekatvam. And then there's even something very, really powerful that makes the soul special. They have the opportunity to know the Lord personally. Now, if you remember in the early part of the Isopanishad, when we talk about the Ishavasham, there was the notion that somehow that God was present everywhere and controlling everything, but kind of our relationship was kind of more like one where we find our place that God has given us, and we follow that. We kind of do what we're told, more or less. We cooperate with this, awesome, gigantic power that oversees everything. There wasn't much notion of a direct encounter. Just that, there's an all-powerful entity, an Isha, the Lord, who's manifested everything, who controls everything. He shows us through the Vedas how we should live, and if we're smart, that's what we'll do. You obey the overarching, incomprehensible power. There's a boss, and if you're smart, you'll do what he says. But generally, in the material world, in our world, you don't meet the biggest bosses. You might have lower bosses and stuff. You don't meet the big guy. You just do what you're told. He says this, you get the memo. The email comes through. You have to do this, and you do it. But here it says that Prabhupada says in the purport here of Mantra 4, he says all power is obtained from the Lord. Therefore, each particular power must be utilized to execute the will of the Lord, and not otherwise. The Lord can be known by one who has adopted such a submissive service attitude. That's from Mantra 4. And then in the next place, again, the souls have the opportunity to know the Lord personally. And then in Mantra 5 in his purport, Prabhupada says, in the Bhagavad Gita 4:11, the Lord says that how he treats his devotee depends on the devotee's degree of surrender. The Lord reserves the right not to reveal himself to anyone and everyone, but to show himself only to those souls who surrender unto him. Thus, for the surrendered soul, he is always within reach, whereas for the unsurrendered soul, he is far, far away and cannot be approached. So we're getting that notion of relationship here, that can be a personal encounter between us and the Lord. So the soul has that capacity. So it's not just that we get the memo of what we're supposed to do, acknowledge that there's an all-powerful entity, and we know he's so far different than us, but that he will appear before us. We can have an interaction with him. Then he says, the real center of enjoyment is the Supreme Lord, who is the center of the sublime and spiritual rasa dance. In the spiritual world, we are all meant to join him and enjoy life with one transcendental interest and without any clash. That is the highest platform of spiritual interest, and as soon as one realizes this perfect form of oneness, there can be no question of illusion, moha, or lamentation, shoka. That's how he explains this. In fact, if you see the soul in everybody, that there's no lamentation or shoka, because he says that soul has a relationship with God. And if as souls we're able to have that relationship, well, it doesn't get any better than that. Okay? And here I mentioned that we've discussed at length the nature of the Lord and his mind-boggling power. Could anything be more mind-boggling than that the same Lord enters into relationships with our tiny, not at all powerful selves? We see that the Lord, compare yourself to Krishna. Okay, we understood how powerful he is. We don't compare, right? Now, in our experience, do very powerful and significant and magnificent people spend much time with those who are not? Not usually.
Okay.
So would we expect, knowing that we are tiny, not powerful, not significant, that God would have anything besides a passing interest in us? We wouldn't. We wouldn't. And so what I'm saying is there's something awesome and amazing about that fact, that he does. The fact that he's there as the super soul is a sign of that. Okay? That's why we should have no shoka or moha.
So I mean, he doesn't differentiate, even though we are so much less, so much lower actually fallen, and then also he doesn't differentiate.
Yeah, and even though we're not obedient, now he doesn't appear unless we're obedient and concerned with him. He allows us that freedom. But we have the capacity as souls to have relationship with this entity that we just discussed. So even if somebody we really admire, another person, also not comparable to God, takes an interest in us, it makes us feel happy. Oh, I never thought I would meet such and such, and they would pay attention to me. So how happy should we be that we have this opportunity? Off the charts. So now I have to bring you down to earth a little bit, I'm afraid. Sorry about this. I got your hopes all up. Unfortunately, the kind of vision and understanding described in Mantra 6 and 7 isn't so easy to come by. Prabhupada mentions this. He brings us down a little bit in the purport. Brings us down to earth. And Prabhupada says, this is a description of the Mahabhagavata, the great personality who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the only super advanced devotees have the capacity for this level of vision. Okay. I'm going to bring you back up again. Don't get too worried. Okay, but we're going to start there. Okay. The Mahabhagavatas, or Uttama Adhikari, see constantly in the way described in these two mantras. There's that word Anupashita, one who sees constantly like that. The realization is so much that it doesn't fade in and out. They understand that very clearly. When they see somebody, they understand that. They very clearly understand there's the super soul and the soul that's very dear to that super soul before them. Fortunately, says there's a second meaning of Anupashita, one who sees through authority. So all of us here, we probably can't reach the first level of qualification and see this way all the time. But we have the opportunity to see through the authority. That's what it is. Now, Prabhupada mentions here in Mantra 6 in his purport, he says, the Supreme Lord's presence is realized in 3 stages. And he talks about it. He says there's the Kanishta Adhikari. For those of you who are here for the Nectar of Instruction, these are very familiar terms. We're coming back again. Kanishta Adhikari, Madhyama Adhikari, and Uttama Adhikari. And the Kanishta Adhikari has a very low level understanding of this, of the Lord's presence everywhere, and presence in other living entities. They have some understanding of the Lord's existence and their connection with Him, and that's important to them. But they don't see how the Lord is present. And this is the Kanishtas, they do not know how to treat other devotees very well, and they don't know how to treat other entities very well. They don't see the Lord present in others very much. The Madhyamadhikari have a much better, it says that they make friends, they worship the Lord, make friends with the devotees, have mercy to the innocent, and they avoid those who are blasphemers and such. So their level of understanding the presence of the Lord has increased, but it's not complete. It's not complete. They still avoid those who are against the Lord, because it can damage their faith, which is not as strong as it can be. With the Uttamadhikaris, their vision is constant and deep of understanding the Lord's presence everywhere. Okay, and so this is another measure of spiritual advancement, this ability to see in this way. We saw how the different Kanishtas, Madhyamas, and Adhikaris were defined by other characteristics, such as faith, increasing faith, We saw that as increasing steadiness in service. We saw it as quality of relationships. And obviously, can't you see the parallel there? How you're going to have a lot better relationships when you see the presence of the soul and the presence of the Lord in others. Right? The more you see that, the better the relationships are going to get better. Right? You can see a connection, a parallel there for sure. And the qualities of the modes of nature, we saw parallels there. Okay? So what I'm going to tell you here in the next slide is that every measure of advancement is simultaneously a means to make advancement. Right? If you move the needle, back in the days when we had all analog displays, right? You had other things that would be a moving needle to show when things are increasing. If you move the needle on any of these measures that define Kanishta, Madhyama, and Uttamadhikari, that's a way to make progress. Right? Building your relationships, building your faith, building your steadiness, right? Building this vision. So all of those measures, each one is a means also. A way you can, whatever level you're at is a symptom of your position. And if you can make any of those better, you're making your position increase. Those are the means. The measures are also means. Does that make sense to you? Okay, these are things you can address to help you advance. These are things that are holding you back in your advancement. So if we accept on the basis of authority that the super soul and the soul, who is very dear to him, this is this whole notion of relationship. This is why the Lord gives us freedom, and this is why the Lord appears to the souls. That's why he's there, that the soul is dear to him, resides in each body. We can make progress in our spiritual lives by learning how to correctly apply that knowledge in our daily lives. So it's not gonna work if I just suddenly say I'm gonna see it all the time. I'm gonna see only super soul in the soul, super soul in the soul, super soul in the soul. It won't happen. It won't last. That's trying to go from your platform to Uttamadhikari platform. It's artificial. But how do you do it in a way? How do you make progress in that way? You first understand it theoretically, right? And you try to at least bring it into your frame of reference a little bit and try to apply it in your relationships. You may have to remind yourself. Right? You're having a painful encounter, and you remind yourself. And maybe that reminder won't last very long, but at least you began, right? And so you begin to remind yourself of that and try to act somewhat on the basis of that. You try to incorporate that into your interaction, that knowledge, right? And gradually, your relationships will improve. And when they improve, guess what? Your ability to understand that's going to increase. So practical application is what makes things realization. That's called vijnana. There's jnana, conceptual or theoretical knowledge. Vijnana means applied knowledge. Prabhupada calls it scientific knowledge, but it means how you apply it. Even if you learn mathematics, you learn a principle, then they give you, 17,000 problems to solve. Because you have to see how to apply the principles to make sense of it. So the practical application shows understanding. So we build the understanding more through practical application than by just conceptual knowledge. So we have to have the concept and try to bring it in to our actions. And as we do that, the understanding increases. That's what it means. Our whole philosophy, that's what we're supposed to be, bringing it into our lives. It isn't just, how much we can recall, and how many concepts we can learn. It's that. Okay, I have this feeling of ticking time. We started late, so we do have another few minutes, so we're going to have to move quickly here at the end. I had some suggestions for application, but we're going to kind of go through these pretty quickly because of our time situation. But at least I think you can also on your own, you can kind of consider how that will make a difference to you. let's go quickly through what I had thought about. And so the instructions here are particularly applicable to our relationships. If we see others in this way, we're going to react to them differently. Okay. If we understand things like as it's projected in mantra 6 and 7, we can become more loving towards others and less offensive. We heard in the nectar of instruction, we had some warnings against being offensive. Right? This helps to accentuate that. It applies in that same way. And as in a society, some measure of conflict and disagreement are inevitable. If we bring the right understanding and mood with us, we'll likely find that resolutions are much more readily found than they would otherwise. Mother Urmila was here some months ago, and I thought she made a really, really right on point where she said that there's kind of material type of conflicts and spiritual ones. She said there's even disagreements in the spiritual world, but she says the difference is that the basis of the disagreement is Krishna's service, and the mode in which it's dealt with is without animosity. So it's when there's animosity that's present. We may disagree. We think it's better to serve. We have this. It's better to serve Krishna in this way. Somebody thinks it's better in that way. But then oftentimes we think, well, you are not a real devotee if you think that that's the best way, or you're, trying to destroy this movement because of that, or you're not a very good person. And that's animosity. That's not very healthy. But if we have the respect for each other and we listen to each other, we still may disagree. But you don't have the hatred, the animosity, the anger, the conflict in that way. And so if we see the presence of the Lord and his dear devotee, we will be less likely to go from disagreement and conflict to denigration and envy and hatred and all these things that we get. The other thing that we may do, and people do, is by recognizing the presence of the super soul and the soul dear to him in others doesn't mean that we should become simply passive. Krishna wants our service, not just our passive cooperation. Prabhupada says, Sri Isopanishad warns us to be very careful to play the part designated for us by the Lord. This does not mean that the individual soul has no initiative of its own. Because he is part and parcel of the Lord, he must partake of the initiative of the Lord as well. When the person properly utilizes his initiative or active nature with intelligence, understanding that everything is the Lord's potency, he can revive his original consciousness, which was lost due to association with Maya, the external energy. So I can do this. I can say, I see the super soul in your heart, in your heart, in your heart. So therefore I can't disagree with you. Therefore, if you do something that I think is really inappropriate, I just have to go, as if the Lord has done it to me personally. I become passive. But Krishna is talking about relationship. That's what he wants. He could just control us if he wants passivity. So he wants our own, as he says, we have our own initiative. So what we do, all right, is that we have to then actually, be an individual. And if somebody is doing something to us that we believe is inappropriate, we can take active measures to try to resolve those situations. What can I do? It's the Lord. No, we can try to resolve the conflict. We can try to find ways to, maybe I have to avoid it. That's another thing. We can take active and proactive measures to try to deal with these things. We shouldn't just become passive. Oh, but everything is perfect because the Lord is present there. No, we're not perfect, and others aren't either. So this is trying to resolve and prevent conflicts is much preferred to simple tolerance. We can try to see if some of the things we are doing are exacerbating bad situations. I've had this experience that I've found later, where I had some of my worst relationships I've had as a devotee. I saw later how I could have done something to fix that. even though I didn't feel, I still don't feel I was doing something particularly wrong, but I wasn't acting intelligently. I could have diffused the situation if I'd had a brain, you know? Because it's not always not just a matter of who's right and who's wrong, but it's intelligence or not. So even if somebody else is wrong, how can you deal with it so they become less wrong? How can we deal with it so it works out? It doesn't matter. You're going to be wrong for plenty of other things. So, what's the harm? Somebody can be wrong. It's okay. But how can you deal with it in a productive way? And so it takes intelligence. Sometimes we have to talk to people. Sometimes we have to think about how do you apply this? A simple-minded thing is, oh, God is there, therefore I just become a nothing. That's not devotion. In Nectar of Instruction, we also learned there's some guidelines for devotee association. Understanding our position, other people's position, and certain recommendations were there. Those were helpful. We should recall those. And then Krishna is residing in our hearts because we are dear to him, and his desire is that we grow in our devotion to him. And that Krishna is residing in our hearts because we are dear to him. This in itself is a useful meditation. And this is all coming back to what I mentioned a little bit earlier. Not that this should make us feel proud or self-important. If someone as extraordinary as Krishna cares for us, shouldn't we feel really, really happy and feel so fortunate? Right? And last of all here, happy people are less likely to be envious, competitive, and discouraged. Instead, they will likely be helpful, cooperative, and enthusiastic. So that vision of the super soul and the soul being present, we also extend it to us, where the soul and the super soul is there, and that in itself should begin to change our view. It's when we feel really unhappy, it's when we feel unsatisfied, that we take it out on everyone and everything around us. We have a real tendency to do that. When we're happy, we tend also to radiate that. So on both ends of it, we can try to apply this knowledge and find ways to work together. Because we understood that from the Nectar of Instruction, that devotional service is done together. It's a collective enterprise. So the dealing with each other in the proper way is essential. It can't be. We escape it, but we cannot profitably do so. And so if we take the knowledge and try to find ways to apply it to make our relationships better, then it becomes very powerful. That's realization, and that will make us advance in devotional service and make everyone's life easier.
But just a comment that they say also happy people are healthier. They live longer.
Everything. It affects everything. It affects everything. So we have a tremendous reason to be happy. Tremendous, something that really, really we couldn't imagine otherwise. And we shouldn't forget that. We will, but we should try to remember it. We do both things. When we forget, we should try to remember. And when we remember, we should try not to forget. That's why Rupa Goswami says that the purpose of sadhana bhakti is to always remember Krishna and never forget him, because those are two separate things. Sometimes we remember when we forget, and sometimes we forget and we don't remember.
So that statement, you're happy because you understand its principles, your constitutional position, and all that, and that potentially can make you happy, and therefore you're less envious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because by nature, we're needy. That's what Prabhupada says, that our natural love for Krishna, our prema, is converted into kama, desire. It reverses. We have a desire to please Krishna. That's real love. We want to please and make somebody else happy. That turns inward when we turn away from Krishna, and so then we want to please ourselves. And that leaves like an empty hole in us that can never be filled. It says it burns like fire and can never be satisfied.
And then we're envious, we're all these things.
All
and
these things, it
makes us
precipitates so many other things, precipitates so many other, our behavior really depends so much on our level of happiness. If you look at the modes of nature, in the mode of ignorance, people are really unhappy and needy. And so the way you see others, you see, how can I get something from you to make me happy? In the mode of passion, you have friends and foes. So you have allies maybe that we can work together and get something that'll make us happy. In the mode of goodness, there's a high level of self-satisfaction. So then you have real empathy. You see others as being like you. You're pretty happy yourself, so you can give yourself more freely to others. In transcendence, you're so overfilled with joy that you don't have to think about yourself anymore. That's just a given. Your own happiness is already taken care of. You don't have to focus on that. You just want it. You just see. You're just concerned about whether others may not be happy enough. What you can do for them. That's real life. That's real spiritual life. So now, because we're under the conditioned life, we feel unhappy, and we want to use things in a vain attempt to find happiness.
So mostly the conditioned life that we are in are in modes of ignorance and passion.
And goodness says it conditions you through happiness and knowledge. So you feel. Prabhupada gives us this explanation. He says the brahmanas may feel that they're very pious and have deep knowledge. There's also the notion of a Sudama Brahmana, the friend of Krishna's who was who was so poor. And he said the reason why Krishna didn't help him before that was that he was attached to being a renounced Brahmana. So when one is in the mode of goodness, you can connect with others, you have empathy, you're quite happy, but you have this notion also that you're a little extra special. You see how you're different from others who are not on that level. So there's a little bit of pride. His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami gives this notion. He says we can see our advancement by how we treat people who are less experienced and advanced than we are. Because if we're very envious, we may be afraid when somebody new comes on the scene, they might surpass us, or they might take our position. We might even want to hold them down. He says if we have only a little envy, he says if we have only a little envy, then we may want to help them, and even help them to the point where they surpass us. And we think, where's the envy in that? But you're thinking yourself as a benefactor.
Right.
So you're thinking that now I'm better than there, and I'm helping them, and I'll get some credit for even if they surpass me.
Even though you are just passing,
Yeah.
you are thinking.
Yeah. He says otherwise, if we see them as just incomprehensibly valuable creatures, and therefore it's our duty to help, we don't think that makes us a good person. And there's no ego attached to it. That's transcendence. That's no envy at all. So mode of goodness is like that. We act in the right way. We have feelings for others, but at the same time, we have a little bit of our happiness comes back from being superior. There's a little bit. It's not very strong, but it's a little bit. Because otherwise, when we're in the lower modes and we feel superior, then we try to abuse people. In the mode of goodness, we'll try actually to help them, but we're taking a little credit that makes us feel a little happy. It resonates in our false ego someplace. I'm a really good person to help these people like that. It's just a trace, but that also holds us back a little bit. But it's far superior to the lower modes. Far superior.
So the daily practice of bhakti is to move from progress in these modes.
That's one measure of it, for sure. Yeah, we should be seeing ourselves becoming. That's one thing that should happen. We should be progressing in the modes. We should be becoming more happy. That self-satisfaction should be coming out. We have the advantage too. In the modes, And there's a certain level of self-satisfaction because the soul itself is happy. For us, though, we have that also that connection with Krishna. So there's a different kind of happiness that comes from that relationship. So we should be coming higher in the modes of nature, so that our natural self-satisfaction should be increasing, but also, we have the chance to feel that connection with Krishna, which is we call it the higher taste, the famous higher taste. So we also get that in our practice, which moves us forward. But we should be trying to grow, step by step. Sometimes we try to take too big of steps at once, but step by step we should be trying to move on all these different measures that we've been given. And so that we looked at all the various details of what it means to be such and such place on the path. So when we can look at ourselves and see, we can diagnose ourselves. Where am I at? What are the things that are holding me back the most? What are the things that are even helping me to go forward? What's the best strategy for trying to do it? That Prabhupada says it's a science, bhakti, which means he said you can if you're not getting the result you're expecting, you can diagnose it. You can see what's wrong. And he uses science for vigyan. It's something that's applicable. So if it's not working out, you can take a look at and see what's not happening, what needs to happen for it to do that. So we need to be able to diagnose ourselves, see what's working well, see what's working kind of okay, see what's not working very well, see what's really working badly, and try to find ways to improve those things. Sometimes it may mean just doubling down the things that are working really well for us. Sometimes we can address some of the issues that are holding us back more. It depends on our circumstance, but I think we can find the tools where we can really find out where we're at and see what's the thing I can do that will help me. Of course, we have the basic program. The chanting is the basis for everything. But we looked at the nectar of instruction. We see that it's related so much to our relationships. It's related to so many other factors. Bhakti is related to so many things. So if we make offenses, our chanting isn't going to work very well. So that you can't fully separate those things. If we could chant better, that would be sufficient for us to make spiritual progress. But offenses kill our chanting. So it's hard to separate that one element from all the other ones. And if we're in the wrong modes, we can't pay attention very well. That's the root of all offenses. So the chanting is like the heartbeat of everything. But the other factors relate to our chanting. And so we think about our relationships, we think about the modes we're in, we think about our understandings. Those things are just as important in many ways. So that's why Prabhupada says we can diagnose ourselves. We can see if lust, anger, and greed aren't reducing in our hearts, then there's something is wrong, and we can diagnose that. And we're trying to get some of the means for doing that through these classes. I can say, where do I look? How can I recognize something that's in a good state and something that's not in a good state? And maybe there are some things I can do to address it.